Greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio and podcast alongside Todders and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Hope you had a great weekend, that you are enjoying the most wonderful time of the year. We are down to our final 2 weeks of the year here on the broadcast calendar. And we're closing the year strong with some of the highest podcast rankings we've ever had. So we appreciate that and are thankful for all of you for that. We're also thankful for great partners like our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American. If you want to try it today or try it again, go to firstcup.com, use the code DACE to get a discount on your order. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. Again, firstcup.com. They put the roast on date right there on every bag. So you see they get it to you as fresh as they possibly can. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE is where you want to go. All right, on today's show, next hour, we are going to walk through the process of taking out an incumbent U.S. senator. Because the biggest story that's happening in domestic politics right now is Joni Ernst and the Pete Hegseth nomination for Department of Defense. And I mean, we are seeing, I think you said, Todd, we have never seen righty media zero in on somebody the way they have Joni Ernst. And I think you might be right about that as a singular figure. We've had eras where kind of like during the Tea Party era where Jeff Flake and Lamar Alexander and a bunch of those guys kind of got thrown into, you know, pardon the expression for the Tea Party, kind of a cup together, right? All right. Mm-hmm. And lumped together. But in terms of the singular focus on one person for derision in elected office in D.C., I don't know that I've been doing this full time now. It's 18 and a half years. I don't know that I've seen anything like it.
Nope, I agree.
And so I think though it's hard. It's like it's not like she's a first time offender, by the way. I mean, she's been a pretty terrible senator for a decade. It's also not like she's the lone offender here. There's way more Joni Ernst up there than Mike Lee's. I go back again, that show we did earlier this year in the overtime where we power rated U.S. senators and John Fetterman came in 12th. The 12th best senator we could come up with, okay? A guy that we are pretty confident was a walking VAERS report just a couple of years ago, right? All right. And oh, by the way, is a Democrat. So I think this is an inflection point, tipping point moment for the right in America. And it's in our own backyard. And we've got some unique perspective on this. And as someone that's been involved in numerous primary attempts all over the country, I think that this requires, I think, a broader conversation to walk through. Because let me tell you what's not going to move the Joni Ernst types. Just rage posting on X. Not that I'm opposed to it. All right, but I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it won't move. I can promise you, barring intervention of the Holy Spirit, there is no volume of emails or calls into her office because all of her ilk have been trained. They don't have to fear the Republican primary voter. And guess what? They shouldn't. I went and looked over the weekend. Over the last 30 years, only 2 incumbent Republican senators who were voted into office by the people were then taken out in a primary. Only 2. Bob Smith in New Hampshire, Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, and then she turned around and knifed the base by running as a write-in, and she's been a senator ever since. So I also think it's fitting, we've got so many smart people here at the Blaze, but the only other guy that I could think of that has done on-the-ground organization and activism at the level that we have on our show over the years is our friend and colleague Rob Eno. And guess where he did it from? Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. I just said Bob Smith was one of the only 2. That would be a race he would know very well. Right? So we want to take a moment here and because we want to take Joni Ernst out, but I wanted to take her out like 2 weeks ago and 2 months ago and 2 years ago. All right. It is not easy to take out a Duke. That's essentially what a senator is. All right. It's not easy to do that. It's only been done twice when they've been voted into office in 30 years. So we're going to walk through this process. One, I want to make sure that you guys aren't misled like some great event or movement is amassing. It might be, but you need to know what this will take. I mean, this is, you know, frankly, it's on par with what we did in our state a decade and a half ago, where we decided, yeah, we know no one's ever taken out state Supreme Court justices before. I guess we'll have to be the first. I mean, it's going to take that level of terraforming. There's no template for this. Number one. Number two, and you'll see it again here in Aaron's montage, we continue to see signs, positive signs, that President Trump has greatly learned lessons and updated his tactics and shrewdness since his last go around in the White House. One area where we've not quite seen that yet, only because frankly it's not been tested really until now, okay, is how much is he willing to put his thumb on the scale and purge the court of the feckless and the treacherous? I mean, if you look at basically every signature primary win, we've actually had quite a few in the Trump era, more than we've ever had before, but they all happened because he got involved. Every one of them did. And all the ones where he didn't get involved, we lost all of those. Right? Even if the whole court agrees that the Duke is terrible and has to go, or the Duchess is terrible in Joni's case and has to go, you don't just get to go into a king's court and knife a duke or a duchess without the king's consent. So I think it's also important, because I don't think, if you want Pete Hegseth nominated, I don't think there's some level, even with the biggest accounts out there, and they're all hammering her right now as we speak, I do not think there's some critical mass where even if you put us all together and we all pointed our guns at her, we're going to move her. I don't. Or any of the other ones like her. I mean, she's got Mitch McConnell's chosen acolyte for Senate Majority Leader. So she's still operating under the assessment that no major Republican consultant groups will step in and take her out in a primary for fear that their candidate won't get funding in another race. This is how the game is played, which means you need a factor that overcomes these other existing metrics. What would that factor be? The king, in this case Donald Trump, gives the consent. So we're going to spend a good deal of time next hour talking about this. At the bottom of the hour, Bob Vander Plaats will join us for his weekly stop, and I'm sure he's got some thoughts on this as well. But let's get things started here with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by He's Back. Donald Trump held his first sit-down interview with mainstream media since his resounding win a little over a month ago. And here are 5 moments that stuck out in his interview with NBC's Kristen Welker. Trump says pardoning J6ers is going to be a day one priority.
I'm going to look at everything. We're going to look at individual cases, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm going to be acting very quickly.
Within your first 100 days, first day?
First day.
First day.
Yeah, I'm looking first day.
Issue these pardons.
These people have been there, how long is it, 3 or 4 years?
Okay.
You know, by the way, they've been in there for years, and they're in a filthy, disgusting place that shouldn't even be allowed to be open.
He says his deportation program will not break up families. He says they'll all be deported together.
I don't want to be breaking up families, so the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together, and you have to send them all back.
Even kids who are here legally?
Well, what you're going to do if they want to stay with the father? Look, we have to have rules and regulations. You can always find something out like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. I'll tell you what's going to be horrible. When we take a wonderful young woman who's with a criminal, and they show the woman, and she could stay by the law, but they show the woman being taken out, or they want her out, and your cameras are focused on her as she's crying, as she's being taken out of our country, and then the public turns against us. But we have to do our job.
He also says birthright citizenship has to end.
Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it. We're the only country that has it.
Through an executive action?
We're the only country that has it. Do you know, if somebody sets a foot, just a foot, 1 foot, you don't need to, on our land, congratulations, you are now a citizen of the United States of America. Yes, we're going to end that because it's ridiculous.
Through executive action?
Well, if we can, through executive action. I was going to do it through executive action, but then we had to fix COVID first, to be honest with you. We have to end it.
On the 2020 election, Trump turns the question around on Kristen Welker.
Now you're going to be leading this country for the next 4 years. For the sake of unifying this country, will you concede the 2020 election and turn the page on that chapter?
No. No, why would I do that? But let me just tell you, when you say the country is deeply divided, I'm not the president. Joe Biden's the president.
But you're going to be the president.
No. I'm not the president. So when you say it's deeply divided, I agree. But Biden's the president, I'm not. And he has been a divider. And you know where he divided it more than anything else, and it probably backfired on him, I think definitely, is weaponization. When he weaponized the Justice Department and he went after his political opponent, me. He went after his political opponent violently because he knew he couldn't beat him. And I think it really was a bad thing. And it really divided our country.
Sir, Democrats have control of the White House now. They didn't in 2020. If they are going around stealing elections, why
when you
didn't
say
they
Democrats have control now
of the White House?
Yeah.
So why didn't they steal this election? Since they have more power now.
Because I think it was too big to rig.
And finally, on the question of childhood vaccines and autism, Trump says with RFK Jr., everything is on the table.
Do you want to see childhood vaccines eliminated?
If they're dangerous for the children. Look.
So possibly?
When you look at some of the problems, when you look at what's going on with disease and sickness in our country, something's wrong.
Are you talking about autism?
Well, if you take a look at autism, you go back 25 years, autism was almost non-existent. It was, 1 out of 100,000. And now it's close to 1 out of 100.
Well,
I mean, what's happening?
Sir, going back 25 years, studies show that there is no link between vaccines and autism. And yet it sounds like you are open to the possibility of him looking
I'm
at
open to
getting
anything.
rid of them?
I think somebody has to find out. If you go back 25 years ago, you had very little autism. Now you have it. I mean,
well, they say because they're better at identifying it.
1 in 100,000, and now it's 1 in 100. That's a pretty bad number.
Childhood vaccines.
I mean, something is going on. I don't know if it's vaccines. Maybe it's chlorine in the water, right? People are looking at a lot of different things.
Well, childhood vaccines.
I want them to look at everything.
Everything. So childhood vaccines have prevented about 4 million deaths around the world every year.
I think that's great.
Isn't that...
I'm all for it. I think it's great. Hey, look, I'm not against vaccines. The polio vaccine is the greatest thing. If somebody told me get rid of the polio vaccine, they're going to have to work real hard to convince me. I think certain vaccines are incredible, but maybe some aren't. And if they aren't, we have to find out. But when you talk about autism, because it was brought up, and you look at the amount we have today versus 20 or 25 years ago, it's pretty scary.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If your approach to everyday aches and pains is just to try to mask them with drugs, or maybe you've just decided, you know what, I'm just going to have to put up with this for the rest of my days. That might be the case. I mean, we get older, these bodies do give out eventually. I check the death rate every morning. It remains 100%. Okay. So nevertheless, there's also a possibility, maybe up to a 70% one, that you are giving in to the chronic pain too early. And that's where Relief Factor comes in. It's a drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs. And its goal is to go after the inflammation in your joints that is likely the cause of your chronic pain. Now, we're not making any guarantees here, but over the years, over 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor. And about 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less, they stuck with the product long term. So what do you got to lose? It's just $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. Again, just $20 at relieffactor.com. Check them out. $20, the 3-week quick start at relieffactor.com. Coming up in the overtime today, I'm going to present some evidence that I think is the strongest piece of evidence that the 2020 election was stolen. And I've maintained that since election night 2020. And we're going to walk you through that in the overtime today. Make sure you become a Blaze TV subscriber so you don't miss it. This is at blazetv.com/Deace. Go there, become a subscriber today so you don't miss all of our exclusive content at blazetv.com/Deace. And you guys might remember last year the data from the Bureau from Labor Statistics about how there were incident reports, people needing time off of work or disappearing from work that just showed up we had a 10-year trend. And remember that BLS stat that showed right around March of 2021, there was a sharp increase in people missing work for non-work related items.
Yeah,
you guys remember this?
Yeah.
I do.
And I thought that was the strongest because what happened in what was going on at that time? Well, the vaccines got rolled out, right? And then later that year, you see another increase when? Well, in September, when Joe Biden does of 21, when he does you can't work at a company, what was it, more than 500 employees if you don't take the jab, right? Okay. This evidence that we're going to point you to in the overtime today on election fraud, I think is every bit as strong as that Bureau of Labor Statistics data is. Because you're also dealing with a long-term metric. This one's even more long-term, by the way, but a long-term metric that pretty much stood the test of time, suddenly had a massive outlier, and then suddenly went away at the same time. We'll get into that today in the overtime. Talking about the president's interview today. And again, this is another example. If you watch the interview long term, and those are great clips that Aaron showed, I mean, he spends much of the interview gutting her. But he doesn't do it in any of the ways that he did it before that caused our audiences to cheer, but everybody else was like, oh boy. Like, there's no splatter factor here. There's no collateral damage factor here. If you didn't like him going in, you don't like him now. If you did like him going in, you like him now. And when you're someone as well known as the President of the United States, that's kind of the best you can do. Most people's opinions are made up, right? So your goal is just to not unnecessarily create new detractors. And this interview doesn't do any of that. Does a very good job throughout this interview reversing premises. Let's take these talking points one by one. All right? On January 6th, we are now approaching the 4-year anniversary of January 6th in a couple of weeks. We still have no idea the truth of the pipe bomber, which was supposed to be, remember, originally their greatest piece of evidence that this was some kind of an insurgency. We don't know what happened with any of that. We still don't really know who Ray Epps was. No one can satisfactorily answer how it is possible the National Guard was not called out. So given that, and then on top of what all we've seen since January 6th of 2021, how many things they've lied to us, like they lied to us about that jab. They lied to us about the border. They lied to us about Biden's age. Tell me something they did not lie to us about. Given that, the president absolutely should blanket pardon everyone. Everyone that was charged, and I don't care what they were charged with. How many times have they lied about the multiple cops who were killed on January 6th, and none of that is true either? He should absolutely blanket pardon everybody. Everybody. And if a few months ago, I would have even said everybody who didn't committed a violent act. No, I'm past that threshold now too. Everybody. I don't care how naked the Proud Boy was under that kilt. Everyone's walking out of prison on January 6th like a freaking boss with a pardon. Everybody is. Absolutely, everybody is. The social compact is broken. I'm not granting any benefit of the doubts anymore to people that have proven over and over again they will not return the favor. So then no. All right, if we're in a cold civil war, it is customary when one side wins, their political prisoners get released, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're going to do here. And then if some of your soldiers went a little too far in battle, you don't tell the enemy, hey, you could keep him in there and torture him. Is that what you tell the enemy? No, you take all your soldiers back. When there's a war and one side wins, they get their prisoners of war back, correct?
Yes.
So we're getting them all back. We're getting them all back. And that's exactly the way that I would look at it. We are getting them all back. We won, you lost. So here are the terms, unconditional. Everybody's going for everybody that wore our uniform. Now, if we've got some miscreants and some people that like to fly a little too close to the sun, we'll deal with that privately on our own within our own ranks. Amen?
Yeah.
But we will not sit there and allow a foreign force, and that's who you are. You might live in the country, you might look like us and speak like us, but you are not like us at all. All right? We are not letting a foreign force impose rules of engagement upon our own soldiers that they themselves have shown in the theater of war over and over again that they have no regard for and will violate the minute they have a chance. Correct?
Yes.
So let them all go, pardon them all, get them all out of there. And then later on, if we've got to clean up some people in aisle 9, some people need to be simmered down and settled down because, they might like they might like the conflict a little bit too much and a dangerous. We'll deal with that. But we'll deal with that in our own ranks, in our own part of America, and on our own time, not yours. Agree or disagree?
Hear. They had to go over the top and lie about everything. The only people that murdered were the kind of people you are talking about, Steve. This is an easy issue, particularly considering what Donald Trump says later on about, the election was stolen. I'm not going back on that at all. This is a stolen election. The fraud isn't on the part of the people you're talking about, Steve. The fraud is still on the part of the government.
Correct.
Yep, totally on board. And I've had the similar evolution. You've got all of the political cover now. I mean, thank you, Joe Biden. I mean, if you went a little too far on January 6th, you better be thanking your lucky stars that Joe Biden pardoned Hunter Biden, because now Donald Trump, and I'm not even talking, I'm just talking politically. Yeah, you have the cover to do that. I just think it's the right thing to do now. I do. I think it's the right thing to do. They have lied repeatedly ad nauseum about this. They will continue to lie about this. They're going to lie regardless of what you do. Yeah, get them all out of the prison, the gulag.
And again, if we've got some of our own soldiers that need to be court-martialed, we do that within our own ranks, within our own forces. You don't let the enemy's forces court-martial yours, right? Mm-hmm. So start thinking like you would think this is a cold civil war. Think of this in the 80s. Would we have allowed the Soviets, if one of our soldiers decided to go ape and went across some border in the Soviet Empire and just went full vigilante, would we tell the Soviets they can just keep our soldier and try them for war crimes? Would we do that? Hell no, we wouldn't. Hell no, we wouldn't. Now, might we have to deal with that soldier when we get him back home? We might, but we'll do that. You don't touch our people. And our people are not your people. And we are not your people. And you've made this very clear. So now we will respond in kind. And anything short of that, frankly, is literally just emasculation and cultural suicide at this point.
Yeah. And gosh, hey, we didn't mention it yet, but just before the show started, Daniel Penny was found not guilty.
Correct.
This
great
ties
example.
right into
Great
this.
example. That's praise God for that. Daniel Penny, you're an American hero. Now get the heaven out of New York and never look back. Get out. That you might as well be. You're in Syria. You're in Afghanistan. Get out. Get out. Flee. They've made it very clear there's no social compact there. You cannot be trusted whatsoever. We went from should we give Bernie Goetz a ticker tape parade in the streets of New York for shooting thugs on a subway to should we take American soldiers who defend women and put them in prison for life because they do it, right? Mm-hmm. Get out. You have to get out. That's where we are. And I hate to say this, but some of you that email me and you're in these deep blue states where they're going to do this to my kid, I don't know how to help you. I don't. You might have to just leave. I don't know what to tell you. That's where we are. We have to accept this. Number two, the group of you that just, so there's a group of you that have littered my feed in the last 24 hours with Trump saying he wants a deal on DACA. Trump has had this position all along. He had this position in 2015 and 2016 when he was talking about building the wall. There's never been a time that Trump did not advocate for a deal on DACA. Who are DACA? Those are the dreamers that Obama made unilaterally citizens, or what are known as anchor babies. Okay? People whose parents brought them here when they weren't legal, and then they had a kid, and a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment, which we'll get to in a second, says that anybody born here becomes a citizen, when that's actually not what it says. And if you go back and actually read from the writings of the Michigan senator in the middle 19th century who actually wrote the 14th Amendment, he was even asked about this during the ratification process, and he explained that's not what it means. That's why the language is it mentions jurisdiction. And I've pointed this example out a million times over the years. If the French ambassador has a kid, okay, that kid, and the kid gets born, at a New York hospital, they're not an American citizen. They're a French citizen. They're here under the jurisdiction of the French government. And they had to quantify this because the South immediately said, well, blacks can't be citizens, okay, just because they were born here. And the argument had to be quantified. No, they were brought here under the jurisdictional authority of the United States. So they are citizens. The United States consented under its jurisdictional authority to bringing blacks here as slaves. So yes, they're citizens. That's why they had to quantify it. They never envisioned that it would mean anyone comes over the border and decides we're going to turn this into little Mongolia. We get to do that because we just outbred you. That's just not, they never even contemplated, frankly, we would be this dumb, stupid, and emasculated that question would even actually be debated. But here we are because we are all those things. So I know, it's amazing. Trump has hit at least doubles on about 14 things here in the last 3 weeks. But those of you that are just rooting for him to fail couldn't wait to blow up my feed this week with the DACA thing. Let me tell you the DACA thing's about. It's about that question right there. It's what I offered on Friday, which is if you've been here for a decade and committed no other crimes and you're assimilated, you can stay. But you can never, you can get a permanent residency status, but you can never become a citizen and you can never vote. And that's how you take the objection off the table of letting them emotionally manipulate, getting rid of all the other fiends and criminals that are here. The Biden administration's brought in over 50,000 people from Syria just since it took over, 98% of them Muslims. That data courtesy of Daniel Horowitz. I'm sure they were all tightly vetted. Thoughts?
They weren't.
No. And by the way, Syria, I'm told, has been liberated. So I guess they can all go back, right? They can all go back home. I mean, their country's been liberated. That's what the same media that Kristen What's-Her-Nuts represents was telling me over the weekend. Syria liberated. So I guess they can all go home then, right? But you have to live in political reality. And political reality is you need to take as many of their objections off the table as you can so that you can actually do what the American people voted you in to do. So would you rather fight over the 50,000 refugees from Syria, 98% of them are Muslim, would you rather fight deportations over those guys or over a few Hispanic families, the small, scant percentage of Hispanic families that have been here for a couple of decades and are on their second kid going through K through 12 school system? If you were fighting the spirit of the age over border security, which case in point would you gentlemen prefer to be arguing about? I think this one's pretty obvious, don't you think?
Yes.
So, fine. We'll just take your objection off the table then. How's that? So I guess you guys will be okay if we just deport all the rest of them then, right? And we all know the answer to that's going to be what?
No.
But you have to make them say no,
yes,
so that they don't get to hide behind the other ones that everyone would be sympathetic towards. And you guys consider yourselves to be the smart people in politics. Let me stop there. Oh, no, the RFK thing. Simple question. This is the only thing I would have advised the president to say when he got off the stage with her. Next time this comes up, just look at somebody and say, well, if all those studies are true, I guess you guys would be fine with RFK Jr. looking into it and getting him and being embarrassed then, right? Yeah. You guys, here's your chance to embarrass and discredit RFK Jr. Go get him. He's up for the fight. Show up to the, I'm just Don King here. I'm just the promoter of the fight, right? I'm just the guy, I'm promoting the fight, I've been pro-vaccine most of my lifetime. I'm proud of the COVID vaccine. Even throw that in their face if you want. But we'll just let RFK Jr. into the fight. Let's see what he's got. Maybe he's got nothing. You guys can discredit him, laugh at him, mock him, and we'll all just move on. What do you got to worry about then?
Exactly.
Show up to the fight. Let's see what you got. Best man wins. Let's see. That's how I'd frame that. Thoughts?
Well, it's because most of these people, including the doctors themselves, don't really know. Most doctors have not been trained in anything related to vaccines other than they bring a big paycheck for them saying, go get vaccinated. That's what they know.
Correct. There's no way to quantify that number she gave. Those are like the COVID numbers.
Unfalsifiable.
Yeah, there's just no way to quantify that. That's just literally a press release that Big Pharma paid her news outlet millions of dollars to air, and she's just framed it into a question. More in a moment. Now is not the time to get complacent, but make sure you're prepared. Yes, we've got some momentum right now in the culture after this last election, but Now is the time to make sure you are prepared for, that could never happen here. Because it will happen here again. We are in a cold civil war. We are up against forces that want to make that could never happen here happen again and again and again. So do what I did after I saw what happened in Western Carolina, what's sadly still happening there. I finally got off my duff, contacted our friends at My Patriot Supply, said, hey, man, hook me up with the water treatment system, the emergency food kits. So I've got that in my shed right now. I'm ready to go just in case that could never happen here happens right here where I am. Do the same for your family wherever you are. Get the 4-week emergency food kit right now. That includes breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks. So the full complement of the 2,000 plus calories that you need of nutrition a day. And not to mention just the peace of mind of knowing you've got it there in the hopes you never have to use it. All right. You can get it right now with a discount, $50 off per kit and free shipping. Stays good for up to 25 years and free shipping up to $50 off per kit when you go to preparewithdace.com. Get it at my landing page. They'll give you the big savings and the free shipping at preparewithdace.com. Once again, that's preparewithdace.com. All right, let's welcome in our good friend, Bob Vander Plaats from The Family Leader. Good to see you, brother. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you. Does that mean we're not doing this next week?
We are here next week. Okay. Next week's our last week. So you'll be here if you want to be on Monday, but then that'll be the last time.
All right. I'll sing Merry Christmas to you.
All right. So
everybody's got that to look forward to.
Obviously, the biggest political story occurring in the country right now has some basis in her own backyard.
Sure it does.
And that involves Senator Joni Ernst. And so I would just love to get, first and foremost, your overall analysis of the situation, where you think it stands, and whether or not I've got very divided opinions of people whose opinions in my orbit I respect.
Sure.
Some are saying they don't think she'll be moved. Some are saying she'll eventually cave, etc. When it comes to the nomination of Pete Hegseth, where are you at with all this as you're observing this, and someone that knows Iowa politics as well as anybody does?
Well, let's do this in a kind of a two-step dance. One is, let's take Joni Ernst and let's talk about her in just a minute. When Trump got elected and won big, 312 electoral college votes, I believe, one of the biggest victories we've had in a long time, way bigger than he won in 2020, so to speak, that hotly contested election. But America sent a message. We want to change. So to me, Steve, and I know being president of the United States is not being president of the Family Leader, but as I tell my board all the time, I said, listen, you guys have one big decision with me. You get to hire and fire me, but I get to hire and fire my team, because I need the board to hold me accountable to my leadership. And a lot of it's according to the team that I assemble here. And my team is good, I'm going to have good results, and they're going to give me, good accountability, good ratings. Same way whether you're Matt Rule in Nebraska football. I see him on the screen down here. Matt Rule is going to recruit his players. You hold him accountable to the players that he recruits and the success of his team. So to me, this is not hard. So I put it out in the tweet last night. Is Trump won? Let him assemble his team, and then let the people of America hold him accountable for the results of that team. To me, that's basic. It's common sense. It's leadership 101. If I was consulting a board of directors, that's how I'd consult a board of directors as well. That said, obviously Joni Ernst, she's given pushback to Pete Hegseth. And I think Pete Hegseth is probably the first one to say, listen, I made mistakes in my past. If I look at his background of being raised in a conservative Christian household, being a valedictorian of his class, receiving a really good education, going off into the military, coming back from the military and saying, you know what, I made some choices I'm not very proud of. But listen, since I found Jesus, and then he lays out about how he's been, and President Trump appointed him. President Trump wants him to stay in, so he's going to stay in. And his goal, he's not going to let the president down, but he doesn't want to let this country down. I'm one of those guys that says, I would confirm Pete Hegseth. I would say, yes, that's who Trump wants. I'll stand behind him. Where does Joni stand in all this, Steve? I don't know. She has not called me to ask my opinion on it. I have not called her. I do know she follows my Twitter feed, those type of things. So I think she knows where I stand. I think this is one you need to move forward here. And then when people expose a lot of the people that Joni Ernst confirmed under Biden,
Yeah, explain to me.
I mean,
Merrick Garland for AG.
Exactly.
Lloyd Austin for DOD. How those votes were totally no issue whatsoever. We can give the Democrats the cabinet they want, but we can't give our own party that.
And that's where that plumb line is about, okay, so how can I vote for this and then say I'm going to hold up this? And so I think Joni Ernst is probably making an issue that's very near and dear to her heart, and I respect her for it, and that is this whole sexual assault, sexual abuse, and she's going to push back on it as hard as she can. I think at the end of the day, she comes around to confirm Pete Hegseth. One is, I think it's in her best political future to confirm Pete Hegseth, but I believe that's where she'll be at the end of the day anyhow.
What would be the limits? And as any of the candidates that Trump has nominated, would they be the limit for you if you were a senator to say, I can't do that, for example?
Well, I guess my default's going to be, again, is to the American people. And the American people elected Donald Trump. And Donald Trump made his pick. For example, Steve, I was not a big Matt Gaetz fan. I mean, when Matt Gaetz got selected as Attorney General, I thought, that's not a good pick. I mean, in the first place I go, Steve, and you know this, I mean, I have peers all around the country who do what I do, just in different states. I go to that state peer right away. My Florida peer was not a Matt Gaetz fan, but I did not push back on Matt Gaetz. I'm like, Trump won. If that's his pick, America should have known what they're getting then. And now Matt Gaetz removed himself. He chooses Pete Hegseth. So Pete Hegseth is either going to have to withdraw on his own, or Trump's going to have to withdraw his backing from him. Otherwise, I think I would approve Pete Hegseth as well. And so I don't know what the limit would be. I think they really would have to present a clear and present danger to this country. And I think Americans had to assess that when they went to the polls to vote for Donald Trump.
Let's talk about primarying Joni Ernst. So I got to correct something because I keep forgetting about Indiana 2012. Richard Murdoch did defeat Richard Lugar in the primary. The reason I keep forgetting that one, he lost the general election that year. All right. So in 30 years, we have had multiple attempts, scores of attempts, but only 3 successful attempts to primary out of office existing incumbent Republican U.S. senators who were voted in by the people. We have some examples of people that were able to win at a convention, like Mike Lee. Sam Brownback was able to beat an incumbent Republican, but she was appointed to finish Bob Dole's term. Nobody ever voted for her. There's only been 3. Richard Murdoch took out Dick Lugar with the Tea Party in Indiana, then lost the general. Joe Miller took out Lisa Murkowski in 2010 in Alaska, and then she turned around and did as a write-in. That's why she's still in the Senate. Yep. And then the Bush family took out Bob Smith in New Hampshire in order to put John Sununu, a family loyalist, in that position instead. Those are the only 3. Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time next hour on the show discussing this in depth, because I think what's happening with Joni is actually a template for the state of the party nationwide, not just in this state and in this particular case. There's a lot of Republicans in really red states that have no interest really or conviction of standing in the gap for the agenda that Trump was elected upon, and there are going to be problems. And so how are we going to deal with that moving forward? Okay, so I'm of the belief, and I said this to the audience earlier, I don't think no matter how bad a Duke or Duchess is, I just don't think you can walk in and knife a Duke or Duchess without the consent of the king, okay? That a king has to give his consent, all right? Because that's a member of the royal court. And if you're a U.S. senator, you are, okay? But what are your thoughts on that process?
Well, I think I take a look at it, Steve, and first of all, I would say there's never been a better primary environment than what exists today. I think that people are really seeing we do hold the power. We do get to choose who gets in and who doesn't get in. That said, there's an adage, you cannot beat somebody with nobody. There's a lot of ingredients that need to come into play. And I think the number one would have to be, as you've already pointed out, Steve, President Trump would have to say, not only am I open to the idea of Joni Ernst being primaried, I am supportive and encouraging of that idea and of this particular person. If there happens to be 2 or 3 who feel called right now that I need to get into the game to run against Joni Ernst in primary, and I'm not one of them, by the way. I'm not in that game. But if you get 2 or 3 in that primary environment, Joni Ernst wins. So you need to have a Trump not just openness, but encouragement, support, endorsement, putting the full weight of the king behind a candidate to run against Joni Ernst. There is a piece of me that believes that if that were to happen, or if that environment were to exist, I'm not so sure Joni Ernst stays in for that fight. I think she may.
And that's happened before.
And if that happens, then you're going to have an open primary.
Jeff Flake dropped out because he thought he was going to lose his primary. Lamar Alexander did. Arlen Specter probably would have lost his primary to Pat Toomey, but then switched parties to Democrats. So that when we've reached that kind of a critical mass before, that's been the typical response of the GOP incumbent.
And you have to
even that's been rare.
And you have to have some issues that people resonate with right away. So like even the marriage issue, when we took out 3 judges, because you never take out 3 judges, right? But when we took out 3 judges, there was an issue. It was the marriage issue, and it was the separation of powers issue. People rallied to that right away. Like, I get that, and not on my watch, we vote out 3 judges. So with Joni Ernst, and this isn't being critical of Joni Ernst. I'm just trying.
I'm fine being critical of Joni Ernst. I have been for about 10 years.
But I'm just laying out facts. You won in 2014 on a commercial that said, we're going to make them squeal, right?
The swamp.
We're going to make them squeal. And it would be like all things to the contrary. We saw her a lot in leadership behind Mitch McConnell, and kind of like same old, same old. And then it was, the Doge kind of resurrected. We just talked about that, I think, last week, about Doge resurrecting, giving her the face of government effectiveness, government efficiency. But now what's getting exposed is the vote on the Marriage Act, where she was wrong on that issue. Iowans will resonate with that. They're exposing the trans in the military. That is something that Iowans will rally to. Women in combat. Iowans will rally to that kind of stuff. So you need to have issues. I think the issues exist. You need to have Trump's backing, which I'm not so sure that exists yet or not, because he's been overly quiet on this one. And you need to have a candidate that with high name ID, who's well-funded, well-resourced, and has a built-in network already to say, I can mount that challenge.
So just as we are talking, Joni Ernst has posted on X a picture of her and Kash Patel to announce her support for Kash Patel for FBI director. Now, many of us in righty media believe that Hegseth is a red line, because if he falls, then they will just turn around and do this to RFK Jr. They'll do this to Kash Patel and several of the other non-swampy disruptor nominees for key jobs that the president has appointed. This is Joni's attempt to deflect that. And she's clearly trying to send a message. No, Hegseth and his issues with women are unique. And I'm not an obstructionist. I just don't think he's worthy of the position. Okay. Who's right? Are we right in righty media that Hegseth is a red line? Or is she right, or even being honest, that when she makes the claim that she's just uniquely going after Pete because of the peccadillos in his closet?
I think that's where you have a politician there who's trying to be nuanced. I'm holding the line on Hegseth, but I'm there to go with Patel. I really believe that's the floodgate that opens. And pretty soon,
so you're with us that this is a red line.
Well, to me, that's where Trump all of a sudden, I won. I got 312 electoral college votes, but these guys are determining my team. I need a team, and he needs a team, Steve, as you and I've talked about. They need to hit the ground running on day one. He's got 100 days, maybe up to a year, but 100 days, maybe up to a year. You're going to go into the 2026 election, and then pretty soon it's going to be he's a lame duck.
And to the president's credit, I know for a fact he is telling people I know that very thing.
Well, yes. Of course, the beauty of it is that he knows, even though he would like to have stayed in office in 2020, 21, I get that. I think that 4-year hiatus was brilliant, if not divine. Because now all of a sudden you have 4 years to take a look back at the system and go, this is what I would do differently. And now he not only did he win, but it wasn't by this razor edge multi-day verdict. It was a clear mandate of the American people. So I think he comes back to lead. But he needs to have a Senate who the Republicans control, who's his team, who need to give him his team.
Finally, you wanted me to ask you about Deace optimism.
We don't hear that very often.
I don't even know what that is. Is that a Christmas miracle? What is that?
I got to tell you what, but I've heard this all over the place. But we just had 2 team members in Washington, D.C., and they're at a conference. And usually when you send them to Washington, D.C., you want to find, okay, how'd you guys find that? They said they have never seen that city so optimistic. I mean, it's like everybody's got a bounce in their step. They're ready to run. They're ready to lead. This Trump momentum, this Trump enthusiasm is very, very real. Now, obviously, they're hanging out with, the guys that won. They're not hanging out with Nancy Pelosi, right? But they said, we cannot believe the optimism. And I would say, as I have my pulse around the country.
Can I say I might rather hang out with Nancy Pelosi and, just get her into 3 glasses of wine and get some stock tips? That's a conversation I'd actually like to have.
Well, I'm not so sure I'd want to pay that price. But it's what I'm saying is that the optimism is real. Even when Trump goes to the Notre Dame reopening in Paris, and you have these leaders who are basically lined up to shake his hand. There's a new sheriff in town. And I think that's what Joni's finding out right now as well. There's a new sheriff. There's new optimism. They want him to have his team. Let him go. Let him run.
Do you think so? Saturday, the president is expected to be at the Army-Navy game, or the president-elect is expected to be at the Army-Navy game, with Ron DeSantis, by the way, who has been bandied about as a potential replacement for Hegseth. Now, listen, I think I suggested to Ron, and have suggested on this show many times in the last 6 months, that should be a job he should take. He'd be phenomenal.
Oh, he'd be a great Secretary
and
of
Ron
Defense,
DeSantis as Secretary of Defense would make them wish they had Pete Hegseth.
Yeah.
That all being said, the precedent of this is how you get to that is a high cost, I think, for us to pay. To let these weakling senators get this trophy. I don't want to. These people have done nothing for us for years. I don't want to give them anything. So do I think objectively? Now, listen, I'm very high on the Hegseth nomination. He was like in my top 3 power rating first round, okay? But do I think Ron DeSantis would be a better Secretary of Defense? I do, just because he's got more experience doing this kind of thing. That all being said, the cost of replacing of that swap out is exceedingly high, and we're giving a bunch of rhino senators a trophy that they don't deserve, frankly. They need to be put in line. Like, you got 20 seconds. Get the last word.
First of all, it's great imagery. It's great imagery for Trump to have Pete Hegseth's back. I nominated you, and I'm going to stay with you. But it's also great imagery to say, and I'm going with my chief rival, Governor Ron DeSantis, to the Army-Navy game. Basically saying, guys, we're all on the same team. I think it's brilliant on his part.
All right, we're going to come back. Hour 2 is next. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre. We're going to be joined by our friend and colleague, Rob Eno, from down in Dallas here in just a few minutes. We are brought to you by our friends over at American Financing. Are you feeling that stress about your family's budget this holiday coming up? You are not alone. Prices still remain high. A lot of people are maxing out credit cards to make ends meet. So now is the perfect time. Get control of your finances and pay off that debt. If you're a homeowner, American Financing can help you do exactly that by unlocking the equity in your home, and you can start saving, and their customers save $800 a month on average. Just imagine what that would mean to your family. It's like almost a $10,000 raise. Plus, if you act now, you might even be able to delay up to 2 mortgage payments, giving you the extra cash here for the holiday season. Wouldn't it be nice to start off the new year without all that debt and those monthly minimum payments? It costs nothing to find out how much you could save. So what do you have to lose just to find out, right? Because the holidays will be here before you know it. So call one of their salary-based mortgage consultants today. Why is that key? Because they're not going to try to keep selling you all the time. They're not based on commission. They've got a salary, okay? So they can be more honest with you. Call one of their salary-based mortgage consultants at American Financing today. Call now, 888-675-4090. That's 888-675-4090. Again, that's 888-675-4090. 888-675-4090. Or go to AmericanFinancing.net/Deace.
NMLS 182334, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
Also, remember, you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Email us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Getter, where else? Instagram and TikTok. Please follow our brand new YouTube channel as well, at Deace Show on YouTube, at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, if you listen to the podcast version, thank you. Please hit subscribe or follow. If you're on iTunes, it's follow, and then leave us a 5-star review. No matter where you are, all of those things help the podcast to grow, and we are in another growth period right now. So thank you guys very much for that. We are closing this year very strong here on the show. So we are appreciative of all of you. Thank you. All right. We're going to spend this hour. I think we're at a key moment here on the right. And as we've talked about at the top of the show today, and Todd initially made this observation, I am not sure. In fact, before I go into my spiel, let's start there and reset this and make sure we all agree. Have we ever seen the colossus of conservative media specifically target a Republican politician, a singular one? I'm not talking like the Tea Party up against all the rhinos, but a singular in the crosshairs target of the almost the entirety of the colossus of conservative media, all has its turrets right now pointed at our state senator here, or U.S. senator from the state of Iowa here, Joni Ernst. This feels like it's kind of unprecedented, this singular focus on one particular rhino. Agree or disagree, Todd?
I absolutely agree. I said as much online as well. I just don't recall. Usually there's a couple people out there willing to say it, but everybody else is like, yeah, this is kind of how the sausage gets made. There's any number of excuses. I've never seen this level of fed upness, because especially since somebody like Joni Ernst, let's face it, for everything, it's your lament about as much success as you've had in being and Bob have had in turning Iowa red. You've had no luck at the national legislative level. This is a red state. It's as quite frankly on many metrics is as red a state as there is. Yet people like Joni Ernst and Grassley continue to bamboozle us. That happens for reasons. They usually get away with it. They kind of do an aw shucks thing.
Right.
And the fact that it's like people like have just zero time for it, we're used to the opposite.
Because she's getting a vetting now. The stuff, we've complained about here in Iowa conservative circles, this is becoming national news now. The kind of stuff that once these genies are out in the bottle, it's not as simple as, okay, she caved on Pete Hegseth, so we're just going to forget all the other stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She's getting a full vetting here. No question about that. Aaron, what about you?
I agree. And I think it's the moment that we're in right now where all of the emotion of that win last month, you have all of the wind beneath your sails. You overcame everything that I've laid out probably ad nauseum. And now the first thing you're going to do is that one of the typical cast of characters is going to knife us while simultaneously pretending to cozy up to us with Doge, because isn't she chair of that or something like. It's just a frustration, a palpable frustration that people are putting out there right now. Joni Ernst, you're not relevant. You're just not. You're not relevant. Either get in line or GTFO. That's basically the sentiment that I'm seeing right here. Enough of this. Trump already won. As Bob really succinctly pointed out, the people hire and fire presidents, and presidents get to hire and fire their own staff. It's not that complicated. Get in line or get out.
Rob, agree or disagree?
Absolutely agree. In 2015 to 2019, it was you, me, and Daniel Horowitz spitting into the wind a lot on this kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we were a conservative review and doing that, and you don't normally see a bunch of people get together. But it is interesting. The play that Joni Ernst is doing is the typical play, right? Get yourself appointed to a blue ribbon commission that does nothing but makes it look like you're doing something, which in effect is what Doge is at this point. And, I think that Elon Musk is not going to take that, and he's going to try and make it more than what it is. But right now it's a blue ribbon commission. So, cut our legs out from underneath us on the stuff that matters, and chair the shiny blue ribbon commission that may or may not do anything.
So that brings us to the conversation we're going to have this hour about what is really a Herculean task: taking out a sitting United States senator. As we told you earlier, it's only happened 3 times in the last 30 years with a Republican that people voted into office. There were other instances where, for example, Sam Brownback took out an incumbent Republican senator in Kansas, but she was appointed to fill Bob Dole's seat and no one ever voted for her. Okay. So it's only happened. There's a couple of instances where Pat Toomey probably beats Arlen Specter, but then he flips and goes to the Democratic Party. Maybe Jeff Flake and Lamar Alexander lose their primaries, but they dropped out before facing that. So but there have been multiple attempts. There's only been 3 successful ones of a senator that people voted into office. Those 3 are Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, was defeated by Joe Miller, who was the leader of the Tea Party there at the time. And then she turned around and ran as a write-in candidate, which is why and won. And that's why she's a senator now. The other 2 times are Richard Murdoch, defeated Dick Lugar, but then he lost that year. Him and Todd Aiken had the comments about babies born via rape and incest shouldn't be executed, and lost their Senate elections over that in that cycle. And then the other is one that Rob would be very familiar with, I'm guessing, and that's Bob Smith was taken out by the Bushes in New Hampshire,
right?
In order to put loyalist John Sununu in that seat. That's it. That is it. That's all that's ever been that's been successful, despite the myriad of attempts. And so I have injected myself into this story for 2 reasons. Number one, I have been besieged with just comments from people, emails from folks like you in our audience, text from people I know, friends and colleagues. I've had over, I think I told you guys before the show, 5 people who work professionally in politics, 1 here in the state of Iowa, 4 with national groups and organizations, or do work on national races, that have contacted me about taking her on in a primary. And since this is going on in our own backyard, I figured I should probably respond to this to some degree. We have a theme on our show this year, which is dominion, right? Control what you can control, where you have a sphere of influence. All right. When you have that, use it. In this case, I clearly have one. Okay. Now, when I go up against Donald Trump in a caucus, I'm 1-1. I beat him once, barely. And then I lost by 30 points in the other one. Okay. So my sphere of influence is not maybe what it used to be, but there is still some. There is a small group of people who have the name ID in our state. We're not a state. We have 1 top 100 television market here. All right. It's not a media capital. So we had a state senator who's got a pretty good record try to take on Charles Grassley in a primary in 22. He got 26%. Okay. So, there's not very many people, probably myself, Bob Vander Plaats, our governor, Matt Whitaker, who was acting attorney general, and a lot of the Fox News audience would know Matt. I've known Matt for many years. He's going to be Trump's nominee for NATO ambassador. And Brenna Bird, our attorney general, I don't know how many people know her. That might be it. People that have the name ID and fundraising contacts, because this is a national race. You're not going to raise the money from Iowans to win this. You're going to have to be able to make phone calls to major conservative groups. These are kinds of groups that I have contacts with. It's not an easy thing to do. And so I felt an obligation, if our theme this year is going to be Dominion, and I'm going to lean on people all year long, that we're going to have to get uncomfortable to get our country back, to then just say, well, hey, our show's going great, not my thing, I don't want to be a senator, and just let this whole battle go on in my own backyard and not take part in it in any way, I felt was really kind of hypocritical of me to do that. Fair? Mm-hmm. Now, to tell you this, praying about it, I don't feel any conviction to run. I don't feel any conviction not to run. All right. I don't want to be a senator at all. Even less than that, I want the Senate to continue to have people like Joni Ernst in it. So, my preference would be someone that wants the job way more than I do, who has the name ID and the fundraising to actually take it on. And if the president wants to get involved, and I'll come to that component in a second as part 2. If the president wants to get involved, I then would be happy to take my contacts and my network and my leverage that I have in Iowa, which is still pretty significant, and put that behind somebody to take her out. But whether I run or which I prefer not to do, I mean, I'm going to have to make a lot of accommodations. If I were to win, some of the show, based on the research I've done, would have to be restructured because of Senate ethics rules. Okay, we could keep the show, but some of it would have to be restructured. That could be a trade-off in that it would greatly raise the visibility of the show, right? You know, but so maybe that trade-off kind of works itself out in the wash. I've still got people that I'm in business with, partners that have have a vested interest in my success. Obviously, the Blaze does too. So it's not like I can just make this kind of a decision unilaterally and not have it impact other people's lives, including the two of you and your families, right? All right. Everybody that has contacted me, I've either not yet responded, or a couple of people that I did respond to, I've said this to them, and I'll say this to you guys in the audience. There is no way I will consider doing this or consider somebody else supporting somebody doing this if I don't know up front that Donald Trump, the king, is willing to let us take that person out or endorse the effort to do so. And it has to be up front. Has to be up front. And this gets to reason number 2. I don't think you can knife a duke or duchess, no matter how bad they are, without a king's consent. They're still a member of the royal court, and that's a senator. And history proves this out. So there have been 3 attempts. The Tea Party got 2 of them, but then lost the general election after that. And Joe Miller and Richard Murdoch. And then in the 3rd instance I mentioned, basically the kings of the Republican Party at the time, the Bushes, decided that they wanted to have a loyalist for Duke and Duchess. And so they attacked Bob Smith from the left, is my understanding of that, Rob, correct? Of that race? With Johnson.
Correct, and Corey Lewandowski was actually the campaign manager on that race.
Okay, so there you go. So again, without a king, so the previous 2 then were successful in the primary, but then lost the general, right? I don't think, as bad as Joni Ernst is, none of us want to take her out to resurrect the Iowa Democratic Party by losing a general election. I think we all agree on that one, amen? Because the Iowa Democratic Party is freaking deader than a doornail right now, right? Okay, so as bad and terrible as Joni Ernst is, and she is bad and terrible and should not spend another day in the U.S. Senate, all right, if we have anything to say, she has to be replaced by something. There will be a senator from Iowa in her seat if it's not her, right? Okay, so none of us want to then take her out and then lose a general. So now you've just resurrected the Iowa Democratic Party. These are all calculations here and reverberations. If you're a serious movement, you're not just rage posting or engagement farming. You need to take a look back and see is there a path to victory here? Now, in our state, given how red it is, if the president supports the effort to depose and exile Joni Ernst, it is highly likely, 80%, that candidate's going to win a general election. And I'm maybe even being not optimistic enough, okay? But I do think you need to have the president's support. So let me walk you through a scenario for me, because I've analyzed this from my own perspective as I would any other candidate. So I mentioned last cycle we had 1 state senator, very low name ID, take on Charles Grassley in a primary, and he got 26%. So what that would tell me as a candidate is, if I were to do this, that's the floor I'm starting with. A state senator that wasn't in leadership, nobody knew, nobody had heard of, got 26% against senator for a century, Charles Grassley in a primary. That's the floor, probably. Because she might be a little more unpopular right now with Iowa Republicans than Charles Grassley was at the time, assuming Trump doesn't come into the race. But some of that is a different kind of unpopularity with Grassley because people are just kind of sick of him being there forever. Fair? All right? So the floor is 26%. If we assume, all right, that maybe there's 10 points of approval rating difference between Grassley and Ernst, factor in margin of error. Conservatively, you're thinking 5 points. She's 5 points more unpopular than Grassley right now. Fair? All right?
Yeah.
So that gets you over 30%, right? In my case, I have the name ID and fundraising and connections that I could bring to the table over the guy that primary, Chuck Grassley, might be worth what, do you think, guys? 7 to 10 points, which gets me to maybe 40. Okay?
Again, that sounds about right.
Does sound good? Rob, you're the only other person at this company I know that has done what I've done. That's why you're on the round table. Am I delusions of grandeur so
exactly
far?
Right.
You think I'm good so far? Okay. So I
think that's really good. It's a hard thing to do.
It is. So let's say I primaried her without Trump. I can get to 40. Okay. And then, because here's what happens. Well, Steve, get in the race and prove to Trump you can win. All right. I exhaust all the resources I have as one of the highest name ID Iowans alive. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I put out, I'm one of the only Iowans to ever produce a major motion picture from concept to theatrical release. Did the Des Moines Register ever do a profile or mention me or anything about that the entire time? No, they did not. But when I put out a couple tweets about primarying Joni Ernst, guess who they wrote about over the weekend and remembered lives in the state of Iowa? This guy, okay? So all that name ID is going to come to bear if I were to get in the race. So let's say I exhaust everything, I put it all in, and we get like a month out from the race, and I've made it respectable. Maybe it's like 54-42 or something in the polls. Okay, but I've shot my wad, man. I've done Bongino's show as many times as I can do it. All right, I've done Tim Pool's show as many times as I can do it. I've done Glenn's show as many times as I can do it. Right, I've done it all. Made every favor I can, but I'm still up against a member of the royal court, and I'm sitting 45%. And we're a month out before the election, and that's what the polls show. I risk the likelihood that Trump at that point makes the decision I cannot win, decides to go ahead and endorse Joni Ernst. We've seen this pattern with Trump in previous primaries. So I'm not speaking out of school. This precedent has existed many times. Decides that the challenger cannot win. Let me go ahead and endorse the Greg Abbott incumbent in your state, Rob, when 4 Republicans ran against him last time, and let me endorse Greg Abbott a month before the primary because it's pretty obvious he's going to win and rebuild that bridge. Right? That's politics. Right? And then what I did is I took everything, a multi-million-dollar business here that's been built around this show, and I risked it all just to get knifed at the end of the primary for what? We get a little bit more visibility, yeah, but that puts a lot of extra strain on me and everyone else here only to have that ending. Is that a very likely outcome if I were to announce tomorrow I'm going to primary Joni Ernst without upfront support from Donald Trump? Is what I just articulated, gentlemen, the most likely outcome of what happens here without his support?
Yes.
It's as likely as any other. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's you want to add something, Rob? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I said, yeah. I mean, you're going to have some things that go beyond that. You're going to have help from 501c4s. Super PACs can now, super PACs can actually coordinate with campaigns on get out the vote. You're going to have some of the things that you need to have. That might be a little bit different than's happened in the past. I think the FEC rulings on super PACs being able to coordinate, which is what Elon Musk did with Donald Trump this year, is significant. But yeah, that's about where you'd be. It's a tough thing to do, to take out a sitting senator. It's
better than most challengers have against incumbent Republicans, but we're at the Ricky Bobby school. If you ain't first, you're last, right? So all you did was get an L. All right. Put an immense amount of strain and extra scrutiny on my family and everything, and the Blaze and you guys and my business partners and I've leveraged a bunch of relationships for something that maybe would be more successful later, but they're exhausted now. And I did it for an L. So no, that's why, to me, before we talk about this, we need to know where the president stands. Whether we're talking about me doing it, which is not what I would like to do, but I'm willing to. If the president of the United States calls you, listen, I didn't want to go to Washington, D.C. with Ted Cruz 8 years ago. I wanted him to be president and then leave me in Iowa. But if he called me, kind of hard to say no when the president calls you, right? Okay. Yeah. So Donald Trump wants to call me and say, we're going to do this and you're the guy. It's not like I think the Blaze or my family's going to say no, but that's probably what it would take for me to even consider it. All right. But I think the same is true for even daring to launch a challenge against her. Because you don't want to strengthen her hand either. You don't want to run a challenge against her and she beats you 70-30. And now she's even stronger and now she's even more brazen than she even was before. So again, if you're going to come at members of the royal court, best not miss. Don't miss. We have the king. They do not fear us. Republican primary, the Republican Party does not fear, on a national level anyway, doesn't fear primary voters. And based on the stats I gave you earlier, they should not. What did they fear? The king. Who's the king? Trump. Now we have watched him clearly evolve and improve and get better as a politician comprehensively in the last few months. In messaging, strategy, policy, virtually everything. The one thing that hasn't been tested yet is the internecine stuff. And is he willing now to go full thumb on the scale and play the role of a king? Notice that he backed Pete Hegseth on Friday after being quiet all week, but he has still not said anything critical about Joni Ernst at all. Has anybody else noticed that? He hasn't even sent Joni Ernst the Truth Social. He sent Mark Wayne Mullen a couple weeks ago, basically saying, hey, nice Senate seat you got there in Oklahoma. Be ashamed if something happened to it. Hasn't even done that. All right? So when we've taken out Republicans or won good primaries in the last few years, Trump endorsed every person. And if he didn't endorse them, we didn't win any of those. So that precedent seems pretty locked into me. If the king wants a different senator from Iowa, we'll have one. If he doesn't, we won't. I don't care who runs, how much money they raise, etc. I think that's the case. And the reason why I think the rest of the country should pay attention to this conversation is because I think this is a template for the entirety of the country. The amount of senators in red states who are Ted Cruz's and Mike Lee's are dwarfed by the amount of senators in red states who are Joni Ernst. She is the template of what exists in many of these red states to get in the way of the agenda and finishing the mission that was granted to us by the American people in this last election. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to turn this over to you guys now that I've kind of laid out my groundwork, my view of the path forward here. And I'm going to then go around the room here the rest of this hour, and we're just going to exchange thoughts on what this means for the right and where we think Trump is on that, and where we agree, disagree, etc. And we're going to do this because we want to replace senators like Ernst, not just because we want to engagement farm. I'm fine engagement farming in the quest of taking out Joni Ernst, but I don't want to mislead our audiences here at the Blaze like some great movement is taking place here if that's all we're doing. If we're just engagement farming, we have no chance to take her out. All right. So you guys gather your thoughts while I talk about our friends over at RAYCON. You know, the holidays are an amazing time to find out you actually don't know what people in your life really want. If you get them something practical, maybe they already have it. Here's a go-to. Something they could use every single day in multiples of RAYCON's everyday earbuds. They're a must-have for any audio lover, make for an amazing holiday gift for anyone on your nice list. They have tens of thousands of 5-star reviews online. Their latest model is better than ever with a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. So both your pad and your phone, for example. All right. The earbuds also come with active noise cancellation, best active noise cancellation of any earbuds I've ever tried, by the way. All right. It's a feature you must have. And it comes, by the way, at an accessible price point, unlike a lot of the other brands out there. RAYCON start at just half the price as the other premium audio brands. You can't beat it. They come in a variety of vibrant colors. All right. So save big for the holidays and get up to 25% off site-wide at buyraycon, RAYCON, buyraycon.com/Steve. That's right. You'll get up to 25% off everything on RAYCON's website when you go to buyraycon.com/Steve. Again, that's buyraycon.com/Steve. All right, Rob is the guest. We're going to go to you first here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, it's everything you've laid out. Is tough. I think for the Republican Party, if Donald Trump actually gets upset and wants to start doing this, and we've known Trump that if you do not support Trump, Trump will go after you, but he can't forget, right? A lot of times he will, and then he forgets because it gets to a point, like you said, that the person that could take out that person, could no longer do it. So I think that you're absolutely right in that Trump or whatever PAC they put together, whether that's Elon Musk's PAC, the America PAC, or it's another America First PAC that looks at taking people out and really goes at, if you do not support us in the things that we want to do in our American First agenda, you will not get elected either congressperson, congressman, congresswoman, or senator again. That's where the real power is, right? The real power in politics is making people pay when they do not do the things that you want them to do. It's with what my friends at the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership say all the time, is pick issues, support the people on them, and then if they don't support you, and in Trump's case, it's the American First agenda, and it's the people that he wants to lead his American First agenda, which include Pete Hegseth. If you do not support that, and more so, if you don't support the legislative agenda, he needs to do it, right? But the problem is we have a tight time frame here. Mm-hmm. I looked at the primary in Iowa, and it's June 2nd. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at 15 months, maybe 15 and a half months.
Which is why rocket fuel name ID to start with is so vital, is because of that. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So you're looking at a year and 5.5 months right now, which basically means you have to start tomorrow if you want to fundraise, right? And then the other thing is that race surprisingly cost a lot of money in 2020. I looked at the numbers. It was Joni raised $30.34 million, but additionally she had $75 million spent on her and in opposition. A lot of it from the NRSC and other organizations, but for whatever reason the Democratic Congressional or Senatorial Campaign Commission thought that she could be taken out and threw a boatload of money, and the Democrat raised almost twice what Joni Ernst did. So there's going to be money coming from the left, which brings up that other point, that you better have the president's, you better have the support to get through that and to get through the general election, because somebody might, if there's not another competitive race in the United States, they might spell,
correct,
quote unquote, blood in the water.
Yep.
And want to throw a bunch of money in.
And then what you've done is you've not only lost a Senate seat, Rob, but in our case, in our state, you've essentially resurrected the entire Democratic Party in the state, which is dead as a doornail right now.
Right. You give them a reason to fundraise.
Correct. Yep.
Which raises the money.
Correct.
And it comes in from nationally. And it's you need to have outside organizations, and I think you would. And I heard Bob earlier say that there's somebody that he might have in mind. You need the 501c4 from the family leader that will get out there and knock doors, and make sure that people are telling their neighbors why they should support someone like you or whoever else it is. I don't think I'm supposed to say you, right? I don't want to get Tyler mad at me, but you or someone, you or someone like you.
The nebulous you, the nebulous you. Yes.
Nebulous you.
Yes.
Or as we say in the South now, y'all.
Yes.
Which is why that word's so great, right? But yeah, that person needs a group like that to help do it. And that's why I said I think that this super PAC ruling, and the Democrats are completely upset about it because we all know that they do it, but they do it with shady 501c4s and 527s and 501c3s that supposedly are just trying to get out the vote. But they seem to only get out Democrats to vote, which is kind of interesting. But, you need that kind of person to get there. And I've seen it done in Massachusetts where we've taken out people using the 501c4 model. And I think that's absolutely what you need. All
right. Todd and Aaron, we're going to get your thoughts here as soon as we come back, and then we'll take the conversation from there. So are we serious about this as a movement, or are we just rage posting? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is the kind of conversation, if we're serious, that needs to be had. More in a moment. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends at Patriot Mobile. If you are tired of supporting companies who are aligned against your values, I've got bad news. You simply cannot operate in American media in a silo where you're not going to have to do that on some level. We don't have that fully have developed of a parallel economy yet. Now, though, comes the glad tidings of great joy. One place where we do is with these little bad boys that we all pretty much have to have nowadays to thrive in modern society. Make the switch today to Patriot Mobile. I talked about them for several years on the show. And then I just thought, man, what a hassle it's going to be with all these accounts and everything else, business, family, etc. Then one day T-Mobile sent out a text to all of their clients saying they're going to start censoring texts based on misinformation during COVID. I thought that was it. I got a hold of our guy at Patriot Mobile that very day. And we've never looked back. They have been terrific. You'll get the same coverage from all of the communist companies without directly giving them your money anymore. They've got an outstanding U.S.-based customer service team. That means you can understand them. All right, and if you want to make the switch today, you've got a free month of service if you use My Name Steve as your promo code. When you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve, use My Name Steve as your promo code to get started with a free month of service at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Promo code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. All right, Todd and Aaron, you guys have kind of heard me and Rob kind of lay out as two guys that have some definitive experience in politics at the organizational candidate level, kind of lay out the groundwork of what it would take to take on Joni Ernst if we're serious about it and not just engagement farming or rage posting. Aaron, I'll let you go first. What are your thoughts?
So I think this is an instructive conversation, if nothing else, for the poli-sci of the new right, or at least the updated right in this country, and how this works. Because the dynamic that you've seen before, primary somebody, primary a rhino, get towards the finish line, it's respectable, and then at the last minute, that's just the reality of politics. Trump comes in and endorses the rhino, trying to save or salvage that relationship. That happens. That's just a fact. So having this conversation, again, this goes back to the kingdom dynamic that I just finally, after the election, I just accepted, and that's kind of opened up my eyes to how things work. It's an instructive conversation for something like that. But I think when it comes to you in particular, and I'm not saying this to diss you, it's just the reality of the business that we're in right now. So this is not meant as any disrespect whatsoever. The thing I would worry about with you, assuming you got I think if you got Trump's endorsement, you would win the primary pretty handily, actually, even against a sitting senator.
She might actually drop out.
Yeah, I'm dead serious. You would win the primary, I think, pretty handily. You're going up against somebody like Rob Sand, who is the highest profile Democrat in this. What is he? Is he treasurer or something like that?
Something like that.
Something like that. Highest name. A lot of the youths in this state love that guy because he's the highest profile Democrat. He's a younger generation.
State auditor.
State auditor. Thank you. Yeah. I would be more worried about the general than I would the primary. Just the nature of the business that we're in. I think just because you're on the record with everything right now, because we're on the record with everything every day from 11 to 1 Central Time. I think the chances of that being successful are a lot lower than you being successful in a primary. So, and I think I'll just leave it there. That I think the general would be the thing that I'd be worried about.
Todd, what are your thoughts after listening to Rob and I?
Oh, that's interesting. I want to work back to front, though, from the primary. I think all that energy that I said is very, very unique on Twitter. That would have to, in some way, transfer over into the population at large. The status quo is the status quo until it isn't anymore. And we can talk about broad politics, but when we talk uniquely about Iowa politics, we got to think, how much has the status quo changed at all? I think for that level of rancor that we're seeing on Twitter to go into the population at large, this has to be uniquely personal to Donald Trump. And as we've seen, there's no evidence right now that that's true. It may be. He may be furious and it may be done for her beyond any of our understanding. But it would have to be that level of personal. Because if it's not, here's what he would be calculating, in my estimation. Is Iowa caucus retail politics still in play? Because it was my reason for thinking it was still in play that why DeSantis, I thought, had a much greater chance than it turned out he did. Donald Trump was a unique time where the caucus politics, where Iowans expect things that I don't think people in New Hampshire expect. It's why they love Grassley, and it's why they love Joni. Mm-hmm. They're nice to me. They come and said hi. They do that thing. It turned out they didn't care about any of that in the last caucus. They just didn't anymore. None of us fully understood it until after the fact. That would have to be overcome. That energy that we're seeing online would have to transfer into that, and Donald Trump would have to, and for that to happen, Donald Trump would need to make this uniquely personal, and he would have to somehow set aside the psychology of what threw him over the top, and none of us really know, is Iowa just going to default back to what it's always been? You have to come knock on my door, I don't care who you are, and they've shown that until last time, that's how they acted about everything, which is why Steve's career could benefit from the fact that I can go to battle for guys like Mike Huckabee because of what Iowans care about. Mm-hmm. And also Donald Trump right now, this big win that he just had, did it provide the coattails? We're talking about a Senate race. What kind of Senate leadership coattails, Fred? None. John Thune is still right there. So there's all kinds of reasons why, if he's not making it personal and saying, oh, I'm all in, and Ira, you remember that guy that you said you were in hell or high water with? No matter the fact that if you're really being honest, yeah, I know and you know Ron DeSantis is a pretty damn good governor and maybe one of the best candidates you've ever seen, but you're with me. It's going to take him bringing that level of energy back, because
and Joni is doing her best to dissipate that. I mentioned last hour she posted a photo on X with announcing her support of Kash Patel. She just posted another one announcing her support of Tulsi Gabbard. She is doing her best to avoid stoking that exact personal grievance as being seen as a Trump obstructor, in order to nuance this, that it's just in particular Pete Hegseth and his past with multiple different adulteries and marriages. Okay, she's doing her best to message that, to not have the very dynamic that you just talked about being applied to her. Okay, so Rob, you've heard from both Aaron and Todd. What are your reactions to what both of them said?
Yeah, they both had excellent points. Again, we're back to the you need Trump to do it. That it's his party, right? But then again, if he supports somebody and then doesn't go all in, that's going to be difficult. But Todd said something interesting, and he said, we don't know if Donald Trump is completely upset with Joni Ernst right now. She's doing the things that she needs to do to make it singularly about Pete Hegseth and keeping, the wars everywhere going forever. But, his campaign manager, who's going to be his chief of staff, has kept him remarkably under control.
Susie Wiles, you're talking
6
about.
months. Yeah, Susie Wiles, yeah. Over the past 6 months of this campaign and into the transition. He is he was on yesterday.
Yeah, phenomenal interview.
In enemy territory, did phenomenally.
Yep.
Did not go nuts on anything until he was asked about his wife, which he said was out of bounds. And I don't even think he went crazy on that. Our friend Brian Stelter seems to think he did, but I don't think he did. So he has been on target, and he's not shown his hand. He's not shown his vest, which is probably vintage Trump, right? He gets. I think one of the things that you saw happen in the first administration, and you're not seeing happen this time, is he was used to being a business guy, and when you're a business guy, and it's why business people don't make great governors. Don't, and
not a guy that ran a corporation, but an empire. He wasn't answering to shareholders and stuff all the time. He was used to.
Right.
He snapped his fingers like Thanos, and stuff just happened in his empire. Yes. Yeah.
Right. He was running his own personal empire, where he was the majority shareholder of everything that he did. Mm-hmm. He might have other investors, but he was the decider. Mm-hmm. And he thought that he could run the country that way. And it's not because he wanted to be a dictator. It's just what his management style was. And I think he understands that he needs people. And if you need Joni Ernst to get every single other one of your people through and not Pete Hegseth, the smart thing is to not go nuts on Joni Ernst until that's all done. And then you see, does she vote with me on certain issues? But then we get into the problem, like we talked about,
timing.
Steve, that you got a year and 5.5 months. And by the time he's inaugurated, you got a year and 4 months.
That brings me
for this to go in. And
go ahead, finish your point, Rob.
No, that was my point.
Okay. That brings me to the final question I want us to wrestle with before we get out of here. Because I do think this thing with Joni is a template for essentially the Republican Party. This is not a unique circumstance with a deep red state represented in a federal office by someone whose values do not align with how far the state has moved to the right. This is pretty much the template across the Republican Party. All right. So I'm going to ask that question in a minute after I talk about our friends over at PREBORN. We just had an election where we saw one side base almost their entire election campaign around, if you vote for us, we'll let you kill as many human children as you could possibly want. And that was some weeks of the campaign. That was the entirety of their messaging. So that just gives you another reminder, even in a post-Roe world, of what we are up against. Make sure you're donating to pro-life causes that are effective, and get that. Understand the signs of the times. That's why here at The Blaze, we've partnered with PREBORN, and that partnership has saved tens of thousands of babies. In its history, PREBORN has saved hundreds of thousands of babies. How do they do it? They confront moms with the knowledge of an ultrasound, so they hear their baby's heartbeat. They can hear that is not their heartbeat, that belongs to another person. And then when mom chooses life, They're there to support her and her baby, sometimes for up to 2 years after the baby's birth as well. Everything is free. The ultrasound is free to her, the prenatal, postnatal care, the formula, diapers, counseling, all of this is free, although none of it actually is free. And this is where we come in. If you're looking for what's a great end-of-year gift that you could give, a few better options than PREBORN. Make that tax-deductible gift today. When you go to preborn.com/Steve, for as little as $28, you could fund an ultrasound that could save a life today. I mean, where else can you spend $28 to save a life as soon as today? All right. Preborn.com/Steve is where you want to go. Again, head over to preborn.com/Steve. All right. Does Trump need a Fonzie? Whether it's Joni Ernst or somebody else. I don't think Trump's got to got to purge the Senate of rhinos. The rhino is a spineless squish of a creature. All right. To me, he needs a Batman Fonzie moment. Fonzie needs to bring someone into the bathroom there one time to make an example out of him, so everybody knows in the future when he says, "Do you want to hit the restroom?" what that means, right? Okay. He needs, like Batman, to stoke fear in the cowardly lots of criminals of Gotham with one act. I think someone's got to be made an example out of, whether it's Joni or somebody else. And when that example is made, I think you'll see a lot of these other folks that want to keep their pensions alive. I think you'll see them fecklessly, cowardlessly, come into obedience. But I do think that him and his team should be contemplating, do we need to make an example out of somebody? And is Joni Ernst that example, or is it somebody else? Rob, I'll let you answer that first. What do you think?
Yeah, that is exactly what I was talking about with what our friends at FACL, the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership, talk about, right? That's the real nature of politics. The real nature of politics is you have to make people fear you. You have to make an example of somebody, or the next group of people that you help will just not do what you wanted them to do and why you helped them get elected. And that is 100% what needs to happen. You need one person or two people that publicly go against you after you've helped them, and you make their life miserable, because politicians, all they want is love and affection. They do not want to be made to feel uncomfortable. They get love and affection, they'll do what you want, maybe. But if you don't hurt them and you don't threaten to hurt them, and this is all rhetorically, not with violence, if you don't threaten to hurt their political prospects, they will keep stabbing you in the back all of the time. So what you said is exactly correct, that he does need to make a Fonzie. He does need to get in there and beat someone up, so that nobody else goes off the reservation, because he has 4 years that he needs to get stuff done in. And if they go, I mean, that's what happened his first year, right? They wasted the first 2 years of his presidency. They got tax cuts done, but that was it. They didn't get rid of Obamacare. They didn't do any of the things that he was supposed to do. And then he went and continued to support those people, when what he should have done is taken out gone against them, so that they wouldn't feel empowered to do it again.
Todd?
That's of course right tactically, and then you start thinking about the specifics. And is it going to be the gal in the state that catapulted him to the beginning of this ride a year ago? I mean, that's it's really, really tough. Not to mention, she got, and then you're talking about needing to have that kind of scalp. Well, to the degree that Joni Ernst had any kind of revival of sorts, and certainly for the wrong reasons, but she was drifting into irrelevance. She jumped on the Me Too train. And now she's she's applying this to Pete and all that stuff. The interesting about this is the real optics of this is, Steve, you know that dying Democrat Party that's almost non-existent in the party? To the extent that the principles that the Democrats stand for are still alive, it's because of her. She's basically the Democrat Party, and she's a Republican senator. And so you have a story to tell that's there, but I'm not sure Donald Trump, with all of the wind at his back, is capable of telling this story.
Aaron?
So, yes, an example needs to be made. Yes, 1,000 times yes, and twice on Sunday. And I mean, there's always the risk. What if you back somebody early, and you get the reason, the Empire strikes back and she actually wins? That diminishes your power. But absolutely, this has to happen at some point. And this seems like a tailor-made case for that.
Rob, we've got 30 seconds. Want to give you the last word. Go.
Yeah, I'm going to basically off of what Todd said. The reason that she was the one that relaunched his career is the reason you need to do it, because you have to show that nobody's safe.
Yeah.
By the way, I just Victory Polling has a poll out of Iowa. Less than 50% of Iowa Republicans support Joni's running for re-election. 73% want Pete Hegseth confirmed. 63% want Ukraine funding halted. 53% said that Joni should be replaced if she votes against Trump's appointees. Another 21% said they were undecided. So there's the environment right there. And that's why Joni is posting pictures of her and Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel as we speak.
Hey, if that's sustainable, amen. Pass the ammunition.
All right. Good stuff, Rob, as always, man. Thank you. Appreciate your expertise. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, we've got Overtime for Blaze TV subscribers coming up next. For the rest of you, we're going to see you tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck. Until then, Romans 8:28.